Do you believe that girls and women were abused?
I believe so, yes. I drank the Kool-Aid at the time. That's the answer, is I drank the Kool-Aid at the time.
Lawyer Darren Indyke has been described in many ways when it comes to Jeffrey Epstein, the man who was convicted of sex crimes back in Florida and also was accused of being a sex trafficker of minors. There are those who believe he was his right-hand man, there are those who believe he was his close confidant, and there are those who believe he was an alleged partner in whatever Epstein was accused of doing. Now, if anybody knows what Epstein was up to in the 90s and early 2000s, it would be him, right? From what we saw behind the scenes as part of Epstein's defense team for his Florida case to the last words the financier said to him, we are covering it all as we examine his newly released videotaped deposition. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law and Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. Hey, real quick, I just want to say thanks for following the story with us. I think it's a really, really important one to cover. And the reason that we can do this is because of the incredible support we get from our partner, Morgan & Morgan, okay? Morgan & Morgan is America's largest injury law firm. For over 35 years, they've been fighting for the people and have recovered more than $30 billion for their clients. Look, the proof is in the track record. With more than 1,000 lawyers across 100 offices nationwide, hiring Morgan & Morgan is like hiring an army to go into battle for you, a team that will fight hard to get their clients the compensation they deserve. Look, not all law firms are the same. You hire the wrong one, you may be beat before you even start. So if you're ever injured, you can check out Morgan & Morgan. Their fee is free unless you win. For more information, you go to forthepeople.com/LC Sidebar. You can click the link below, or you can scan the QR code on screen.
Do you personally believe that girls and women were abused by Jeffrey Epstein in Palm Beach?
I do believe that Epstein engaged in bad conduct with women, yes.
So the two men who might have been closest to Jeffrey Epstein had to answer some very critical and, sometimes uncomfortable questions posed by the House Oversight Committee earlier this month. Now, we're not only hearing their answers, right? It's not just reading from a transcript. We are seeing it for ourselves. We have the videotapes. We are seeing the reactions as they were confronted with the guy that they were working for such a long period of time, not only what he was convicted of, but what he was accused of. And they had to face the fact that they have been accused of being complicit in whatever Epstein was accused of doing. And we did a whole sidebar yesterday on accountant Richard Kahn's testimony, the money man, which included details about the Epstein Victims Compensation Fund, what we saw inside Epstein's multi-million-dollar homes, why he continued working for Epstein after Epstein was convicted of sex crimes in Florida. I'm talking solicitation of prostitution, procurement of a minor.
In hindsight, I regret that I relied on Epstein's word that this would never happen again. And I believe at the time, we were in the middle of a financial crisis and I had a family to support. So I made the wrong decision in staying working for him, because I later learned as co-executor that Epstein continued to abuse hundreds of minors and adults. So I made an improper decision.
And you can check out that full episode over on Longtime's YouTube channel. But right now, today, I want to talk about the other guy. I want to talk about Epstein's other apparent right-hand man, his former lawyer, co-executor of Epstein's estate, Darren Indyke. Now, he worked for Epstein for decades, reportedly starting in the 1990s. And by the way, when you type in Indyke, into the DOJ's website, the Epstein Files Library on the DOJ website, you get more than 30,000 hits. Now, he has been accused of giving young women and girls money or gifts at Epstein's request, allegedly facilitating forced marriages to secure immigration status, reportedly helping dispose of evidence that could have implicated his boss. I mean, those are the allegations. He's never been criminally charged. He's never been prosecuted. He's never been arrested, And he's never really been directly implicated in a criminal investigation of any sort of wrongdoing, as far as we can tell. There have been allegations that were made against him in litigation, but nothing from a criminal context. But I will say this, in the Epstein files, there's a diagram that was apparently put together by the feds that shows Epstein's purported inner circle. Indyke is right at the top. And by the way, as we go through his testimony, there was a claim by at least one member of that committee who believes Darren Indyke might have committed perjury when he testified. Now, we're going to dig more into that in just a minute, but here's what he had to say, Indyke had to say during his opening statement at this March 19th closed-door deposition. I will just tell you, it's very fascinating we even get this video. Usually closed-door depositions, we wouldn't even get this, but unique case, spirit of transparency, I'm not surprised it was released. Take a look.
My complete lack of involvement in that misconduct is a matter of record. Not a single woman has ever accused me of committing sexual abuse or witnessing sexual abuse, nor claimed at any time that she or anyone else reported to me any allegation of Mr. Epstein's abuse. I did not socialize with Epstein, and I reject as categorically false any suggestion that I knowingly facilitated or assisted Mr. Epstein in his sexual abuse or trafficking of women, or that I was aware of his actions while I provided legal services to him. Far from being Mr. Epstein's lieutenant or chief of staff, as I have been incorrectly described by plaintiffs' lawyers and uninformed journalists, I was one of many attorneys who Mr. Epstein regularly consulted, including such noted luminaries as Kenneth Starr, for entirely legitimate purposes. My primary role was to provide corporate, transactional, and general legal services to Mr. Epstein and his companies, and yes, I did so. The press and plaintiffs' counsel have mischaracterized cash withdrawals I made from Mr. Epstein's bank accounts from 2013 to 2017. Entirely ignored in that reporting is the fact that the bank involved knew full well that these accounts belonged to Mr. Epstein. Neither I nor he made any effort to disguise his name or identity. And as part of its standard policy, the bank itself imposed a $7,500 limit on daily cash withdrawals. I was not attempting to structure such withdrawals to avoid federal reporting requirements. Quite the contrary. I simply sought to comply with the bank's internal requirements and limits, with the bank's full knowledge. It is undisputed that during this time, Mr. Epstein had difficulty accessing credit cards from major banks. Instead, he and his staff required cash to pay for a wide variety of expenses, including maintenance, repairs, and daily household needs for his residential properties in New York, Florida, New Mexico, Paris, and the USVI, as well as meals, gifts, gratuities, and fuel for his private aircraft. For a person of Mr. Epstein's financial position, with 5 multi-million-dollar residences, staffed by dozens of employees, and with an extensive travel itinerary, it did not strike me as unusual that Mr. Epstein's business, household, and personal needs required large amounts of cash on a regular basis. I never believed that the cash I withdrew from Mr. Epstein and his staff was used by Mr. Epstein or his staff for any improper purposes.
But what Indike did know was Epstein's Florida case. Remember, he was convicted in 2008 for procuring a child for prostitution, solicitation of prostitution. That was the so-called sweetheart deal that allowed Epstein to avoid more serious federal charges, potentially more serious time.
I also understand from your testimony during the previous round that you ultimately represented Mr. Epstein along with other counsel in connection with his arrest and prosecution in Florida.
I was never the direct defense counsel, but I was brought on as a group of people that were.
So it would be fair to say that you were a member of his defense team.
Yes, very loosely, but yes.
So I think that anticipates my next question. Was there an allocation of responsibility among the members of the team? Did certain lawyers have responsibilities that differed from others?
You can't talk about how he allocated responsibility among the lawyers. There wasn't a group meeting like, you do this, you do that, you do the other thing.
Based on your observation.
My observation was that there was a group of lawyers at the time, all of whom kind of shared information and did things together. My role was kind of specific task oriented. Sometimes I would, if Epstein would ask me, did so-and-so do this yet? Could you ask them to do this or ask them when they're going to do this? But I believe it was more like a group thing. Some people were better writers than others. Marty Weinberg was a very good writer. Jay Lefkowitz also a very good writer. But I think as a rule, everybody kind of worked together.
And what, to your understanding, were the crimes that Jeffrey Epstein ultimately pled to?
My understanding was that there were 2 charges. One charge was a solicitation of prostitution, and the other charge was procuring prostitution of someone under the age of 18.
And please correct me if I'm wrong. I understand from your testimony earlier that you were aware of the requirement that Jeffrey Epstein register as a sex offender in various states as a result of his plea. Is that right?
Yes, I became aware of that fact, yes.
And that included New York State.
Yes, there was an initial registration in New York.
And you were involved in the registration. Is that right?
Yes, I believe I was involved in the registration.
And did you become aware in connection with that Jeffrey Epstein was designated a level 3 sex offender in New York State?
The answer to your question is yes. But that was after a round of litigation.
The issue was litigated.
The issue was litigated, yes.
Okay. And were you part of the legal team that represented him in connection with that litigation?
Loosely.
Were you troubled by Mr. Epstein's guilty plea and incarceration in Florida?
I was troubled. I guess the answer is yes. It was troubling. The problem I have in grasping and kind of tackling the question you have is not really knowing what it is. It has come to, as it's come to pass. Clearly, he did something. But at the time, what I was struggling with is what it is that he actually did do. I think I went into previously I went into how the police reports were inconsistent with recorded statements, how there were references to items as sex toys, which were broken salad utensils. There was even a statement from, I never heard the statement directly, but I was made aware of a statement made by the lead prosecutor in Florida, who was a female experienced sex crimes prosecutor that uttered a statement to the effect that there were no real victims there. Now, I'm not saying there weren't. I'm just saying that that's what I heard at the time. So I'm struggling with these things and not knowing what allegations are true or what allegations aren't true. And I know that with respect to his sex offense, the sex offender charge, which was required not by the state, it was required by the U.S. Attorney's Office. After the state had kind of convened a grand jury, the grand jury came back with something that, I don't remember the charge, but it wasn't that charge. And the consequence for that charge was mandatory PTI, which was much less than obviously the police chief wanted. And so what happened during the course of the federal investigation is the U.S. Attorney's Office wanted something more than that, and wanted him to plead to charges that would, one, put him in jail, and two, plead to charges that for which there would be a sex offender registration requirement. And the charge that they ultimately said you should go back to the state and make them charge you this was a charge that the defense team had been saying that they didn't have the factual predicate to actually have that charge, but that will do it because that's what you want to get this thing resolved. So the troubling part of it, it's hard for me to know for sure what actually happened, what was true, what was not true. A lot of the allegations turned out not to be true.
What about now? Do you have a belief as to whether girls and women were abused in Florida?
Well, again, after he after he was arrested the second time and then died, lots of people have come forward. Lots of them come forward who didn't come forward before, who said that they hadn't come forward. But since then, as the co-executive of the state, I've been made aware of many, many claims. And so with that number of claims being made, it's really hard to say that, no, he didn't do anything. Obviously, he did a lot of terrible things. So my view is, I don't know exactly what he did. And I say this again because I want everybody to be clear about this. I didn't see it. I didn't see anything and nobody complained to me about anything. So I don't know. But all these people came forward. So obviously there's something there. So your question is, what do I believe? No, I believe he did bad things.
At any point after you learned about Mr. Epstein's arrest, in Florida. Did you ever consider quitting your job?
With all of the discussion about how, the answer is, I don't think I did. I'm going back in time. I don't think I did. And the explanation for that is twofold. With all of the discussion about the defects in the investigation and statements from like the lead prosecutor and all this stuff and the lie detector test and all this and all of these other things, I think there was even a psychological evaluation that said he wasn't a pedophile. And so all of these conflicting reports came. It seemed to me, who was very inexperienced with this stuff, that maybe it wasn't what they were saying. And so
When taking into consideration all of that information, it sounds like you were weighing the question.
no, I'm putting the question now. The question then was, I drank the Kool-Aid at the time. I think that's the answer, is I drank the Kool-Aid at the time.
Now, I should tell you, it seems working for Jeffrey Epstein was a lucrative endeavor for many of his closest associates. Why do I say that? Because the committee members grilled Indyke about the amount of money he made over the years as Epstein's attorney.
He was very generous with you. So from 2003 to 2013, according to public reports, your personal bank account received more than $2.4 million from Epstein, while your business account received over $8.3 million. You also received a loan that was never repaid of $7 million, and a copy of Mr. Epstein's trust showed that he planned to leave you $50 million, 50, which was matched only by his girlfriend, Karina Shuliak. What were you doing for him that made him so generous to you?
I think I've already discussed all of the things that I did for Mr. Epstein, which were all legitimate legal tasks. I was working for him at least 6 days a week, sometimes 7 days a week. I was on call 24 hours a day with him. And I was not at liberty to take on other clients in a way that other lawyers in private practice would want to take on clients to continue their business.
At the end of my time, that's a lot of money. Yep.
And as we told you in a previous episode, Epstein also apparently funded fertility treatments for Indyke and his wife. Indyke apparently referenced that in a letter that was going to be part of Epstein's sentencing back in Florida. So he was attesting to Epstein's character. Quote, thankfully, after our 5th cycle, my wife and I were blessed with twin daughters. Although Jeffrey was adamant that we owed him nothing, Jeffrey honored us by agreeing to be the godfather of our children.
Did you ever ask Mr. Epstein for personal favors?
Let's see how to answer that question. I asked him for help when I was, I think it was my first year or so. My first year or so when I worked for him. I don't remember the exact time period. My wife and I were having fertility issues. Infertility treatments were quite expensive, and they weren't covered by insurance. So I had asked him if it was possible for me to forego the insurance, and in lieu of the amount of money that he was paying for insurance at the time, if I could take that money and apply it towards the cost of infertility treatments. And at that time, his response to me was, absolutely not. You should keep your medical insurance, and I will pay for your infertility treatment. Subsequent to that, it didn't work, and it didn't work, I think, 4 other times. Subsequent to that, without me having to ask, he would tell me, when are we doing the next one? And so Epstein paid for all of our infertility treatments until we were able to conceive.
So a big focus of both Indyke and Kahn's depositions were the claims that were made against President Donald Trump, which were revealed in the release. As we've told you, this information comes from unverified tips that came into the FBI's National Threat Operations Center, which means there's a lot of secondhand information. There was no corroborating evidence, but it said redacted reported an unidentified female friend who was forced to perform on President Trump approximately 35 years ago in New Jersey. The friend told Redacted that she was approximately 13 to 14 years old when this occurred, and the friend allegedly bit President Trump while performing. The friend was allegedly hit in the face after she laughed about biting President Trump. The friend said she was also abused by Epstein. And there's a note that this tip was sent to the Washington office to conduct an interview, and we know there was a whole back and forth about whether there were more interviews that were part of the release and not part of the release. But during Khan's deposition, there was some back and forth about whether Jane Doe 4, she's the now adult woman who claimed Trump sexually assaulted her when she was just 13 years old, Khan seemed to struggle to remember if Jane Doe 4 received any payouts or settlement from the Epstein Victims Compensation Fund. He even went so far as to notify the committee after his deposition that he could no longer confirm or deny whether Jane Doe even filed a claim. So what did Indike have to say about this?
Now, Jane Doe 4 alleged that she met Epstein in South Carolina in the 1980s, and through him was introduced to President Trump, who we know the allegation was that he abused her when she was 13, and these are allegations made by Jane Doe 4. Are you aware of Jane Doe 4?
I'm aware of the Jane Doe, the case, Jane Doe.
You're aware of Jane Doe 4?
Aware of the case Jane Doe 4. I'm not aware of the person.
Do you know the identity of Jane Doe 4 in this case?
I don't.
So you do not know the identity of
So
Jane
sitting
Doe
here
4?
today, I couldn't tell you.
Okay. Have you ever seen a document with the identity of Jane Doe 4?
I'm sure I must have.
You have seen a document?
I'm sure I must have.
Okay. Now, last week, Mr. Khan, who's the co-executive of the estate, testified that Jane Doe 4 had received a settlement from the Epstein estate, of which you're a co-executor. Mm-hmm. Now, later in the deposition, when oversight staff attorneys asked about the settlement involving Jane Doe 4, Mr. Khan's attorney clarified on the record, according to his team, that Mr. Khan's earlier testimony had been mistaken and that neither he nor Mr. Khan recognized Jane Doe 4 as someone who had filed a claim against the Epstein estate. Now, since then, there's been additional back and forth and confusion about the details of Jane Doe 4 and her interactions with the estate. And there's been back and forth and clarification. So I just want for clarity, since you're a co-executor, Mr. Khan, and given your position as a co-executor of the estate for both, did Jane Doe 4 receive a settlement from the estate? So to be clear, as your position as a co-executor of the estate, did Jane Doe 4 receive a settlement from the estate?
So, Congressman Garcia, I have to say two things about anything with Jane Doe's. The first is we're bound by court orders not to say anything about the identity. To the extent someone has sued under a Jane Doe name, we're not permitted by court orders to say who the person is at all. Secondly, putting aside whether it's someone as a Jane Doe or someone specifically identified, we are bound in confidentiality requirements in any settlement. We are, as the estate and the co-executors, to not identify if someone has settled or anything about the settlements. Having said that, any of those claimants who have settled, typically they are not bound by that. So, you're free to ask them if they want to identify things, but we cannot do that.
Good.
Aside from the identity and disclosing the identity to us of Jane Doe 4, any NDAs or non-disclosure agreements, as we have made clear in prior cases, Congress does not recognize. And we have the ability to determine whether we do and do not recognize. In this case, given that you were under subpoena, we would ask that you provide us information whether Jane Doe 4 received a settlement.
And I heard you. Let me continue.
Yeah, but let me just say to that quickly that putting aside whatever order may come out requiring them to disclose, I believe, but I'd have to look at each particular settlement agreement, we likely have notice provisions to the person settling. If we were bound to disclose it, to first notify that person, because they could probably take.
To be clear, you're not confirming or denying that there was a settlement with Jane Doe 4. Is that correct?
We cannot.
So, Mr. Indike, was there a settlement paid from the Epstein Victim Compensation Program to any Jane Doe or Jane Doe 4?
We have the same confidentiality restrictions.
So you're not unwilling to answer if there was actually a payment from the Epstein Victim Compensation?
It's not a willingness issue. It's a bound by confidentiality.
I'm not going to take that premise, but I understand your position. Mr. Indike, do you have any additional information on Jane Doe 4 that you can provide us?
No.
Now, after the deposition, you had Representative Dave Min, who told the press that was gathered outside that Indike likely perjured himself.
I have to say I'm very surprised that he did not take the Fifth Amendment. I think it's very likely he perjured himself over and over and over again. And just to give you a few examples, I'm not going to go into detail, but, he claimed, and I think this is in the statement you all received, that he had no knowledge of any women or girls, and yet that doesn't account for the fact that numerous women have described how he helped them fix their problems. One woman had described how he had helped her get an apartment. He helped women with their immigration issues. He reportedly told a number of women not to talk to police when the police started investigating Epstein. It's just not credible to claim that you had no knowledge of what was happening. I asked, among other things, about the $725,000 that he withdrew in cash at the maximum level of $75 to $100 per withdrawal. That doesn't trigger federal reporting. He couldn't describe what that was for, just kind of, again, claim no knowledge, and don't want to get into the details. You'll read the transcript, but this is just not credible. What is also really something that is incredible is that the FBI and Department of Justice had never interviewed Mr. Indyk or Mr. Khan, even those people were central figures in the Epstein files and the scandal around the rapes, the human trafficking, and all that. And I just want to applaud Robert, Jasmine, Summer Lee, who's not here with us, because it's under their leadership that we are moving forward right now. And I think what has become crystal clear over the course of these last few depositions is that these people are going to lie to us over and over and over. And what is really important is that we get the documents, because the documents are the things that can actually show us what actually happened here. I suspect he's going to give a few more hours of saying how he knows nothing in defiance of actual evidence showing he knew a lot. I think he, again, is perjuring himself. If I was advising him, I'd tell him to take the Fifth Amendment, because I believe he's guilty of perjury.
Representative Robert Garcia shared similar feelings, releasing the following statement. Darren Indyk played a central role in facilitating Jeffrey Epstein's abuse of women and girls and managing legal strategies that helped Epstein avoid government scrutiny. In his deposition before the committee, Indyk would not confirm or deny a settlement with Jane Doe 4, who accused Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein of abuse when she was a minor. However, he confirmed the existence of hard drives held by Epstein's private investigators. These hard drives are of great interest to our committee. Survivors and victims of Jeffrey Epstein deserve to know the truth. Oversight Democrats will not stop until there's full transparency about everyone complicit in Epstein's crimes. Now, it's unclear if those accusations of perjury could lead to legal consequences down the line. They would have to refer to the DOJ. They would have to assess if there's something there, and they'd have to assess if they want to move forward. Perjury can be kind of tricky unless you have a black and white case where you can definitively show someone wasn't telling the truth and they willingly, knowingly weren't telling the truth. It can be murky, it can be tough to prosecute. But I want to go back to some of the other big moments from Indyk's deposition, okay? Because both Richard Kahn, the accountant, and Indyk, they apparently moved massive amounts of money around for Epstein. According to Kahn's testimony, when Epstein died in 2019, he had somewhere between $500 and $600 million in assets. And the committee members were skeptical. Indyk never suspected that some of these transactions were illegal or criminal in nature, or at the very least suspicious or unexplained.
Mr. Indyk, with the benefit of hindsight, were there things you witnessed or observed about Mr. Epstein that could have suggested he was trafficking and sexually abusing young women and girls?
I mean, at what period of time?
During the entirety of your relationship.
I had no knowledge of any allegations before 2006. And after 2006, when he ultimately went to jail and was back, my understanding was that the issue was underage people, sex with underage people. My understanding was that it was limited to Florida. And when I was in New York, which is where I spent my time, I never saw any underage people. I never saw any sexual activity. Nobody ever complained to me about sexual activity. I had no reason to believe that there was engaging in sexual activity, and frankly, given the amount of scrutiny that Epstein was under, I didn't believe he would do something like that, particularly after he told me he wasn't going to be in that position again. He was, by all accounts, a very smart man. I couldn't imagine he would do anything to put himself back in that position again. So no, there's nothing that I saw that would lead me to believe that he was engaging in misconduct.
And you've discussed at length the cash that was withdrawn that I believe you had a role in retrospect. Would that have been something that should have raised concerns?
Not with the size of his households. Not with all of the things that was needed for that cash. I mean, the island alone, they were buying tools and supplies and furniture and all manner of things. Food. They had construction workers on the island. Pools were breaking down all the time. They had machine shops. They needed lubricating supplies for the machine shop. Any number of things like that. Given the size and scope of his households and the number of people involved and the fact that there wasn't a lot of credit cards available at the time because banks were basically shutting him down that way. No, the cash that was being asked for me seemed to be for legitimate purposes, and I had no reason to think that they were for illegitimate purposes.
Did you also handle his taxes?
No.
Did you ever review his tax returns?
I reviewed his tax return. The answer is no, not while they were being done. In connection with the estate, I reviewed the tax return.
Hundreds of thousands of dollars were given every year out in cash. I mean, technically, you have to file a 1099 if you exceed $600 in a year for services. So, I mean, that's not.
Are you aware that 1099s were not filed?
We'll look into that and get back to you.
Okay. But that's not my role. That wasn't what I did.
During the deposition, by the way, which lasted nearly 7 hours, I will tell you, and this is something why it's good to get the video, Indike seemingly appeared defensive.
Did you settle victims' claims associated with the crimes pre-2008?
Did I settle the claims?
Were there dozens of victims that were underage that ended up suing Epstein or the estate, and did you settle those claims?
I don't know the number of people that were underage, but there was a list of people that the government provided, and I believe there were a number of those people that filed claims against Epstein, and those claims were ultimately settled. Yes.
Were those settled in 2009-10, or were they settled post-death?
2009 and 10.
Okay. So you, in fact, did have to get somewhat involved in his alleged criminal activity prior to that to settle the claims.
I wasn't involved in his criminal activity.
Well, you had
That's
to
a
get involved, you had to
mischaracterization.
understand the depths of it because you had to settle the claim on behalf of the state.
So that we're clear, people settle claims for all kinds of reasons, including the cost of litigating, the time spent litigating, how much it interferes with your current business.
So wait, did he go to jail because he didn't do anything wrong?
I didn't say that.
Okay, so he did something wrong and he settled a claim. You're saying he did. I mean,
No, I'm not saying that, and you're putting words into my mouth, and it's actually unfair. What I'm saying is, on a case by case basis, you can look at a settlement and see whether or not the claims in those cases have merit or they don't have merit. And while I will never be in a position, I will never want to be put to the task of saying that any particular woman who's claiming abuse wasn't abused, I won't do that. I will say that there were facts that came to light during the defense counsel's investigation of many of these claims, which suggested that some of these allegations in these claims were not accurate. So which claims were true, which claims were not true, I don't know. I wasn't there. I wasn't in Florida. I don't know what was true or was not true.
but you were involved in that.
But let me finish what I was saying, please. What I have said is that now it's clear that there was misconduct. Okay? I also was clear that when he was in jail and he looked devastated and told me he wasn't ever going to be in that position again, and told me he didn't know that there were people that were underage, and said this was never going to happen again, I believed him. And I told you in my opening statement that that was a mistake. And I do feel horrible about that. Had I known that he was doing it, I would have walked away. But in the context of all of the information that was provided, which suggests that a lot of what was being said was not true, and a lot of what was being claimed about happened in the past, after he had gone to jail and after he said he wasn't going to do it again, I didn't have a reason to believe after he got out that he was doing it again.
I started out, the first question asked was about this, because in your opening statement, you said, I made the mistake of believing Mr. Epstein that he would not again commit a crime. He has never been indicted, charged. I don't even know if he's been investigated for anything after 2009. I mean, the indictment in 2019 was 2002, 2005. So what criminal activity are you aware of that occurred after he got out of prison that violated your trust? Like that is what you're talking about here.
When he died, and it precipitated kind of a flow of people coming and making claims against Epstein. And there were lots of people that made claims against Epstein. And there were lots of people that went to the Epstein Victims Compensation Fund to make claims against Epstein. With that benefit, and as you said, how could I possibly say that nothing happened with that number of claims out there? And given that, that's what I was talking about.
So
I don't know what's true, what's not true, but I know there's stuff there.
What are the crimes that have been alleged are sex assault, are sex trafficking, human trafficking? What else is on the list?
I don't know if the crimes are sex trafficking or human trafficking. What I know is that people claimed that he abused them, he sexually abused them. There were claims, I believe, in some of the complaints that were filed after he died about rape. Those are the claims that I did not know about.
How many of the victims that have made claims and have recovered from the different funds post 2008 did you interact with on a regular basis in your capacity as his lawyer?
A very small minority of them. The only people that I would have interacted with were people who were
ostensibly assistants.
And the committee members also wanted to know whether Indyk told alleged victims not to talk to law enforcement, because in the files release, we got a look at this 2019 account of who appears to be a Polish former model who worked for Epstein as an assistant between 2005 and 2006. At least that was the claim. She apparently spoke to the FBI and federal prosecutors and says, quote, Epstein told Redacted that there was an investigation and that it had something to do with visas. Epstein told Redacted that they were asking about her parents. Epstein had surprised Redacted with a visit from her parents. Redacted knew that Epstein was lying about how her parents got their visas. Redacted recalled a time where she was on the island and Epstein told her, "Do you see the camera? They're watching me." Redacted did not recall how she had learned about the actual reason for the initial investigation. Epstein's counsel, Darren Indyk, called her into his office and told her not to talk to law enforcement.
During the previous hour, I believe the minority had asked you if you ever had any contact with victims. I believe you answered no. Is that right?
That's, I think so. Yes, I think that's when you say contact other than assistance, right?
So for the record, you never told victims not to contact or speak with law enforcement. Is that right?
So the answer is yes. I never told anybody not to speak with law enforcement. I remember one or two occasions, and I don't know when, and I think this was in the early investigation or the later investigation, that there were people who were concerned that law enforcement was calling them, and the defense counsel, who they didn't know, asked me to call them and tell them that they could have a lawyer if they want, that they didn't have to speak to them if they didn't want. But I never told them not to speak to one. I simply related the statement from the defense counsel that if they wanted a lawyer, they could have one provided.
Now, according to Indyk, he actually spoke with Epstein 2 days before he was found dead in his jail cell in 2019. Remember, Epstein was being held at the Metropolitan Correctional Center in New York City ahead of a federal sex trafficking trial. And according to multiple official reports, Epstein was found hanging by a bedsheet in his cell during an early morning bed check. So what did he have to say to Indyk just days before?
When was the last time you spoke with Jeffrey Epstein?
A couple of days before he died.
What did you talk about?
Just to be clear on that.
It's privilege. I mean, it was not personal. It was privilege. It was based upon his being in the jail at the time, and it was regarding subjects that one would talk about like bail and things like that.
Okay, so I am going to ask the witness for the substance of those conversations.
Those are subject to attorney-client privilege.
Yeah,
He's
I think
not
so.
going to be able to answer
I'm
the
not gonna
details on that.
Okay, so I'm going to refer that one to the majority for a ruling, and for the record, the question is, what did Jeffrey Epstein say to you during your last conversation with him those 2 days before he died?
And you have a generic description of him already from the witness.
So there you have it, some of the testimony of Jeffrey Epstein's lawyer, Darren Indyke, and ostensibly one of his right-hand men for decades, insisting he knew nothing, saw nothing, heard nothing. What will come of this testimony? We will wait and see. That's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you should get your podcasts. You can also check us out on NBC's Peacock as well. If you want to follow me, X, Instagram, my News Nation show, Jesse Weber Live, Monday through Friday at 11 p.m. Eastern. See you next time, everybody. With the allegations of sexual assault and now possible dead bodies buried in the area of Jeffrey Epstein's former New Mexico ranch, we have stumbled upon a report to the FBI that Epstein may have had very strange equipment on the property. Equipment one could potentially use to destroy evidence. Now, with the launch of 2 brand new investigations into the Zorro Ranch, are investigators going to actually find anything if evidence was possibly destroyed? Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Longtime. I'm Jesse Weber. As you know, we have been focusing a lot recently on Jeffrey Epstein's former property, the Zorro Ranch out in New Mexico. Why? Because on top of the prior accusations of sexual assault occurring on that property, which we're going to talk about, now in the newly released Epstein files, there are accusations of dead bodies buried in that area. And you have 2 investigations that have been launched in New Mexico. So first, you have New Mexico lawmakers who officially launched a truth commission. In fact, to give you an idea about this, we had Representative Andrea Romero, who said that this subcommittee will use subpoena powers and public records and testimony to, quote, put the whole story together. At the same time, the New Mexico Department of Justice announced that they would open a criminal investigation. They released a statement saying the following. Upon reviewing information recently released by the U.S. Department of Justice, Attorney General Raul Torres has ordered that the criminal investigation into allegations of illegal activity at Jeffrey Epstein's Zorro Ranch be reopened. Although the state of New Mexico's prior investigation was closed in 2019 at the request of the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York, which we'll talk about, revelations outlined in the previously sealed FBI files warrant further examination. Special agents and prosecutors at the New Mexico Department of Justice will be seeking immediate access to the complete unredacted federal case file and intend to work collaboratively with our law enforcement partners, as well as the Epstein Truth Commission recently established by the New Mexico legislature. As with any potential criminal matter, we will follow the facts wherever they lead, carefully evaluate jurisdictional considerations, and take appropriate investigative action, including the collection and preservation of any relevant evidence that remains available. That's exactly what we're talking about now. We are moving quickly and deliberatively on this issue and will provide updates as appropriate. So, with that in mind, as we think about these investigations, we found a very disturbing document in the Epstein files that we need to talk about. And this raises an allegation now of whether Jeffrey Epstein, or possibly somebody in his employ, could have possibly destroyed evidence. What am I talking about? We go to this FBI crisis intake memo, where it says that a retired New Mexico State police officer. So first of all, if that's true, this is a very different line of credibility than if you have somebody, John Smith or an unidentified person or someone off the street, right? This is apparently a former member of law enforcement. Now, this person, we don't really know the name, but this person apparently contacted the FBI National Threat Operations Center on July 19th, 2019. Time frame is important here. So this is after Epstein was arrested on federal sex trafficking of minors charges and before he was found dead in his jail cell, okay? Now, this is what the FBI crisis intake memo says, this document. Quote, Redacted provided the following information. Redacted lives in the neighborhood of a property owned by Jeffrey Epstein. The property, which is on Zorro Ranch Road, Stanley, New Mexico, has recently had a large barn constructed. The barn is suspicious as there is a garage door that appears to be a sally port, and there is a chimney. Now, a sally port, by the way, is a secured, controlled entryway. You usually see these in fortifications or prisons, so kind of odd to have at a property like this. By the way, as we're going through this, you have to wonder, with this Truth Commission being set up and also with the Department of Justice now launching a criminal investigation, whoever this person is, if they're still around, are they going to come forward now? Something to think about. Quote, Redacted is concerned the property could potentially have an incinerator concealed within the barn. An old 1970s mobile home was recently put right behind the barn, which Redacted believes does not follow Santa Fe County regulations. There have been a lot of high-profile people seen frequenting the property. Redacted has heard rumors that the property was used for recruiting girls to visit with Epstein, but he has no factual evidence to support this claim. Redacted heard rumors that girls from Albuquerque and the Moriarty area were recruited for Epstein. Redacted patrolled this area for 15 years before he retired. The property was owned previously by the governor of New Mexico, but the property was sold to Epstein before the governor's passing. The property that Redacted is reporting is about 3 miles away from Epstein's mansion. Redacted explained that there is a lot of security for the properties, including cameras, alley ports, and other security measures. Redacted explained that Redacted, the barn that was constructed, doesn't look like a barn you would use for ranching. Redacted wanted to report the information to the FBI because he is concerned evidence could be destroyed here. Again, as I mentioned, this is allegedly coming from a former member of law enforcement, so you have to look at it differently, right? You have to look at that perspective a little differently. But to be clear, we do not know who this person is. We do not know whether this tip was followed up on. I will say it is disturbing, to say the least, about a reportedly, 7,600-acre property. And the natural question is, was Epstein or somebody in his employ allegedly hiding or destroying evidence? And will there be anything for investigators to find now? By the way, this is one of the reasons why it's frustrating to see an investigation into this property, maybe a more thorough investigation or a continued investigation in 2026, not 2019. Guys, have you heard about this? Breaking news. A recent report from Forbes shows that employees who use AI at work, they are earning 40% more than those who don't. Yeah, AI is changing employment, and right now it really matters because the early adopter, that phase is over. So the question is simple. Will you watch this shift, or are you going to win from it? Outskill, we got to talk about them. First ever AI-focused educational platform for AI learning. They are hosting a 2-day AI mastermind training live this Saturday and Sunday, 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. Eastern. And right now is the perfect time to join because you can get in free for the next 48 hours. This 16-hour AI training has already built 10 million plus AI professionals across all industries. And by the way, is rated 4.9 stars on Trustpilot. You're going to learn to build AI agents that plan, write, and execute for you, automate workflows, connect tools like Sheets and email to create systems. You'll get a boost at work with the hours that you save, and you're going to learn to profit from those skills. People from this training have launched AI services that bring in $2,000 to $3,000 a week. You're also going to get the AI Prompt Bible, the AI Profit Roadmap, a personal AI Toolkit Builder, and the 2026 AI Survival Hackbook. This is a guide of upcoming AI shifts and steps to take to be prepared. Now, seats are limited, so use the link in the description to join. Plus, join our WhatsApp community to stay updated. Hope you can check it out. Now, I will tell you, New Mexico's Attorney General Raul Torres told The Sun that reported on this too, said, quote, revelations outlined in the previously sealed FBI files warrant further examination. I mentioned that too. And it's our understanding that investigations into the Zorro Ranch, they were closed in 2019, and it hasn't been searched by authorities since that time. And let's not forget, by the way, why this is really coming back in the news. Okay, why are we talking about this? Because in the millions and millions of pages released as part of the Epstein Files Transparency Act, there is an email that is standing out for a very, very disturbing, dark reason. We did a whole Sidebar episode on this, but I'll mention it again. You have an email from 2019, okay? And it appears to be directed to Edward Aragon, this local radio host. And the other names on the email are redacted, but it says this. Edward, this is sensitive, so it will be the first and last email depending on your discretion. You can choose to take it or trash it, but this comes from a person that has been there and seen it all as a former staff at the Zorro. Again, something to think about. As I mentioned, the launch of these new investigations. Is this person going to come forward? Okay. The material below was taken from Jeffrey Epstein's home as my insurance in case of future litigation against Epstein. Sorry, no questions. What is damning about Jeffrey Epstein is yet to be written. Did you know somewhere in the hills outside the Zorro, 2 foreign girls were buried on orders of Jeffrey and Madam G, presumably Ghislaine Maxwell? Both died by strangulation during rough fetish sex. And there even appears to be links to purported sex videos, including one that says sex video with a minor. Please arrange for 1 Bitcoin by 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Thursday, 11/22/19, to the Bitcoin wallet address redacted. The USB will be sent anonymously to your attention by overnight courier upon receipt of the funds. You have my assurance this is exclusive, never shared before, no attorneys, no samples, no questions, please. Confirm ASAP. And by the way, Aragon said he got this message anonymously. He apparently sent this email to the FBI, which is why it was in the Epstein files release from the DOJ, by the way. And he indicated that he didn't pay this person, which when you think of what in Bitcoin, our understanding is it was about like $8,000 at this time, so many years ago. And he indicated that while he spoke to an FBI agent about this, he never heard anything more about it or the status of the investigation. But let me be clear, we couldn't find more corroborating evidence to support this, right? I didn't see anything more in the files to suggest about dead bodies being buried on this property. I don't know if these allegations are true, or if true, when this would have happened, right? That's important too, because I'll play it in a little bit, but I did an interview with Nita Rutherford, a coroner, to talk about the challenges about even if you find human remains, what is left? I mean, dental records, hair fibers, what can they tell you about the story? Particularly if you're dealing with strangulation, there's no clear markings sometimes that would tell you what happened for cause or manner of death. But if you want to check that full sidebar out, you can. A little bit later, I'm going to play you a sample of what she had to say. But at the very least, I can tell you this claim is being taken seriously, right? And also to be clear, this email has come into focus for all nefarious reasons, because Epstein reportedly purchased the property from former New Mexico Governor Bruce King in 1993. You have these separate civil lawsuits that accuse Epstein of sexually assaulting women and girls at this property. It was dubbed the Playboy Ranch, where Epstein is accused of, by the way, sexually abusing a 16-year-old girl as early as 1996. For example, in an unsealed 2016 court deposition, Epstein accuser, the late Virginia Giuffre, testified that Ghislaine Maxwell told her to give the late former New Mexico Governor Bill Richardson a massage at the ranch. I want to expand on that for a second. So at Ghislaine Maxwell's sex trafficking trial, where we learned a lot more about these allegations and about the evidence against her and Epstein, you had a number of accusers who testified, and they talked about New Mexico. So for example, at her trial, there was one accuser, Jane, who testified how she traveled with Epstein and Maxwell to the ranch in New Mexico, and when asked by a prosecutor whether someone came into her room, this is the back and forth, quote, "I just remember someone at one point just came into the room and said, 'Jeffrey wants to see you,' and then escorted me to see him. Question, when that person came into your room and told you that he wanted to see you, how did you feel?" The answer, "I just as usual felt like my heart sink into my stomach, you know?" Question, and why was your heart sinking into your stomach? Answer, because I did not want to go see him. Question, what's the next thing you remember about that? I just remember being led to his bedroom and, the same thing would happen. You had another accuser who testified, quote, "I was very aware at that time that I was, very isolated, that, I was on this ranch with these two," meaning Maxwell and Epstein, "with these two people, and, no one's safe for a great distance. And so I just had thought, I just need to get through this and then it will be fine. And so I just, I didn't say anything." The question was asked, "Did Epstein cuddle you?" Answer, "Yeah." "Can you explain what happened?" "Yeah, he just, as I said, he's kind of had his arms around me and I felt again kind of frozen. And then I thought I have to have an excuse to get out of this. And so I just said I needed to go to the bathroom, and it was in my bedroom area and there was a bathroom near. And so I just made the excuse and got out of the bed and went into the bathroom and shut the door." Another accuser, by the way, once alleged that at this ranch in New Mexico, the following happened, and this is laid out pretty detailed in a filing in a civil lawsuit. It says, quote, "Jane Doe was taken to an upstairs bedroom. Epstein was lying on the bed on his back wearing only a bathrobe. Epstein ordered Jane Doe to stand next to the bed and give him a massage. As she started to do so, Epstein opened the bathrobe so that his was visible. Jane Doe sensed that Epstein expected her to do something sexual to him, but she did not know what it was. Epstein seemed to get frustrated as a result. Epstein then said, in substance, "We're going to try something different." Without warning, he grabbed Jane Doe by her shoulders and laid her down on the floor. And I'm not going to get descriptive, but she claims that he sexually assaulted her. And as I mentioned, the late Virginia Giuffre claims she was abused at this ranch. And actually, to give you an idea about this, she said the following in a court document and even added photos. Quote, "To illustrate my connection to these places, I include 4 photographs taken of me in New Mexico, shown below. The first one is a museum in Santa Fe, New Mexico. We had gone sightseeing for the day. Epstein took this picture of me. I was approximately 17 at the time, judging from the looks of it. At the end of the day, we returned to Epstein's Zorro Ranch. The second picture is me on one of Epstein's horses on the ranch in New Mexico. The following 2 are from wintertime in New Mexico. And as I mentioned, Giuffre alleged that Epstein trafficked her to the late governor, Bill Richardson, who died in 2023, by the way. And his spokesperson had previously denied the allegation, saying that he, quote, had limited interactions with Mr. Epstein, that he never saw him in the presence of young or underage girls. I'll also tell you, as we talk about the New Mexico property, there was a disturbing New York Times article from back in 2019 called "Epstein Hoped to Seed Human Race with His DNA," which alleged that Epstein told people that he wanted to impregnate women and have them give birth to his babies on Zorro Ranch. Actually, by the way, this article was included in the Epstein Files release. I mean, I even found this email that was sent to Epstein in 2010 from a redacted, so we don't know who it's from. But I just want to read it to you. "You've been on my mind a lot today. Just gave a talk in Philadelphia, hung out with Barnaby, and we had a mutual admiration moment about you. We also talked about genius, ... and eugenics." In one document about Epstein, it says that it was reported in August 2019 that Epstein had planned to, quote, "seed the human race with his DNA by impregnating up to 20 women at a time using his New Mexico compound as a baby ranch where mothers would give birth to his offspring. He was an advocate of cryonics and his own idiosyncratic version of transhumanism, and it said that he intended to have his and head frozen." Now, I got to call this out, too. Apparently, the FBI at one point had interviewed the Zorro Ranch manager, the manager of Epstein's Zorro Ranch. And I want you to just listen to this. Quote, "Redacted and his wife, Redacted, have been managing the Zorro Ranch for Jeffrey Epstein for approximately 4 years. There are 5 to 6 full-time staff at the ranch, as well as some seasonal employees. Epstein spends approximately 50 days a year at the ranch during his downtime, mostly in the summer. In the summer, Epstein generally spends 2 to 3 weeks at a time at the ranch. It is shuttled around by helicopter. The last time Epstein was at the ranch was Thanksgiving 2006. Epstein normally flies into either Albuquerque or Santa Fe and is driven to the ranch. Very little notice is given before Epstein flies to the ranch, usually 24 to 48 hours. Epstein usually brings his personal assistant, Redacted, his bodyguard, friends, personal trainer, and sometimes his masseuses. The masseuses are not normally flown to the ranch, but are hired by Redacted and Redacted. Redacted keeps the financial records and usually arranges the massages. The names of the masseuses are obtained from 10,000 Waves Day Spa or by referrals. Redacted said that the masseuses are all checked out and that they are professionals who are licensed massage therapists. There have been approximately 5 different therapists used in the past. Redacted said Redacted could provide the names of the therapists used and the amounts paid to them, but that we needed to go to the office to meet with her. Upon arriving at the office and greeting Redacted, Redacted received a phone call from the, quote, main office that told him they were no longer allowed to speak with us. The interview was immediately ended. Talk about suspicious, right? There's one thing to say, look, anytime an employee, talks to law enforcement about investigation of some kind, you want them to lawyer up. But I got to say, given these allegations about the New Mexico ranch, isn't that weird? Feels weird, right? Now, here's something interesting if we're talking about evidence and the allegations of hiding or destroying evidence or what new information that investigators can find. Remember when I said nothing really came from that 2019 investigation? So there is this email from an assistant United States attorney, appears to be Maureen Comey, in September of 2019. And it says, quote, "As a preview in response to redacted email, we spoke with the New Mexico Attorney General's office back in July of 2019. In essence, they agreed to cease any investigation into sex trafficking and share whatever they had gathered to date regarding sex trafficking activity with our office. We agreed that they were free to proceed with whatever other investigations unrelated to sex trafficking they may have concerning Epstein, and told them that at the conclusion of our case, we would pass along any information we may have gathered about state crimes that were committed in their jurisdiction. We have not communicated with anyone from the New Mexico AG's office since that conversation in July 2019. You also have a December 2019 email where a prosecutor says they have, quote, not searched the New Mexico property. Goes back to my concerns and reservations I had before this. So look, it does become a question of what investigators, lawmakers could or would find now. And back in September of 2019, you had Commissioner Stephanie Garcia-Richard, who sent a cancellation letter to Epstein's company, Cypress Inc., which was listed as the owner of the Zorro Ranch. And I just want to read you a part of it. It says, quote, the Attorney General has concluded that Cypress may have obtained the leases through illegitimate means for purposes other than ranching or agriculture. Now, I mentioned State Representative Andrea Romero before. In a statement, she said also that, quote, New Mexicans deserve to know the truth about what went on at the Zorro Ranch and who knew about it. We have heard years of allegations and rumors about Epstein's activities in New Mexico, but unfortunately, federal investigators have failed to put together an official record. With this Truth Commission, we can finally fill in the gaps by investigating the failures that led to the horrific allegations of abuse and crime at Zorro Ranch. We can learn from them and prevent such atrocities from taking place in our state going forward. Now, I mentioned this before. I want to play you a portion of it. I did a whole interview with Coroner Nada Rutherford, Dr. Nada Rutherford, on what happens if they found human remains. Can they ID it, the cause and manner of death? It's up on our Longtime YouTube page if you want to check the whole thing out. But here's a sample of what she had to say regarding how they could even go about searching the property.
So they would need some sort of ground penetrating devices that could help to look and see if there's some sort of grave there, if they put this person in a box, if they buried them with something special that's not supposed to be in the ground naturally. So they're going to need a lot of technology first before they just go digging around this property.
And it's a big property. It's a big property. And this allegation is not even clear about when these people were allegedly buried there, which makes me wonder, even if you were digging, what could you potentially find? What would be left over?
You're going to have skeletal remains at this point. These allegations purport that this happened so long ago. And so not only did they say that these are possibly minors, so you have smaller bodies that are potentially buried. You have scavengers that are in this area, again, animals that are indigenous to this area. Again, it is very hard to dig a grave unless you have special equipment, and especially on that type of terrain. So did they have special equipment? We know that supposedly these people have a lot of money. They have a lot of resources. So if they tapped into those resources, they could have done this properly. But again, that's why the technology piece of this is going to be so important, to be able to see where they could have possibly buried someone. And then the amount of time that has passed, it's going to be grown over. You're not going to be able to see, freshly disturbed ground as you would for someone who has maybe been recently buried. And so again, this is going to take a long time. And those excavation efforts are probably just going to reveal skeletal remains, which then you're going to have to extract DNA from possibly the femur bones. And then who are these supposed minors that were there? Do their families know that they're missing? Where were they trafficked from? So not only are you trying to pinpoint country of origin, possibly, since they said that these minors were possibly from foreign countries, now you're going to have to try to track down family utilizing DNA. Skeletal remains, again, you look at the femur bone, you're trying to gather the DNA from there, but what else could you do? Dental records and things, but you must know the identity of the person in order to be able to do that.
All right, a lot to think about. That's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar. Everybody, thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you should get your podcasts. You can also check us out on NBC's Peacock. We have our episodes up there as well. If you want to follow me, X, Instagram, my News Nation show, Jesse Weber Live, Monday through Friday, 11 p.m. Eastern. I'll see you next time, everybody. Jeffrey Epstein's accountant, Richard Kahn, the money man, the man who coordinated payments, finances, purchases, managed his estate. He was in the hot seat, grilled by the House Oversight Committee on what exactly he did and what did he know about regarding the deceased sex offender. We're going to get into his responses. We're also going to get into the responses from lawmakers, try to understand what information he shared, as well as what the Epstein files reveal about him. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law and Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. Now, as we're talking Epstein's money man, let me tell you something. If you owe the IRS more than $25,000 in back taxes, you're going to want to listen up. Does the thought of your back taxes keep you up at night wondering if the IRS is about to levy your bank account or garnish your paycheck? That is where Tax Hardship Center comes in. This is the #1 tax relief firm in the nation with an A+ rating that has settled hundreds of millions in tax debt for people just like you. Don't call the IRS yourself and poke the bear. Don't do that. The experts at Tax Hardship Center can find out where you stand without you even lifting a finger, and they will lay out a plan to fight for the best possible resolution. You can even start your free no obligation consultation right from your phone. So if you owe back taxes, go to taxhardshipcenter.com/taxhelp now or call 877-644-6939 right now and let them show you a way out. In the years that I provided outside accounting and bookkeeping services for Jeffrey Epstein, I was not aware of the terrible and unforgivable things that he did to women and girls. My relationship with Epstein was strictly on a professional level. That is the theme of a big day on Capitol Hill that happened yesterday. Jeffrey Epstein's money man testified in front of the House Oversight and Government Reform Committee. Richard Kahn. You want to talk about a name that appears over and over and over again in the Epstein files? Epstein's accountant, worked with him since 2005, seemingly managed his financial affairs, handled wire transfers, signed checks, taxes, distributed money on Epstein's behalf. Richard Kahn, you type that in, appears over 50,000 times in the Epstein library on the DOJ website. Now, this is somebody that the committee obviously wanted to interview because they always say, follow the money. What is the connective tissue? Now, to give you an idea, this is the guy whose name came up when we discussed Epstein having secret storage units. Remember, we had that whole discussion. Did Epstein purposely direct all these materials to the storage units so they weren't on his properties? So if authorities were going to search his properties, they couldn't find these things. We actually did a full Sidebar episode on what appeared to be in one of those properties. But how about this? Richard Kahn apparently sending this note to Epstein in 2012. It says, "We had a lot of excess equipment, furnishings, and supplies at 301 in trying to preserve as much usable stuff left behind, such as computers, supplies, etc. I will need some time to get rid of it. If you do not care where the stuff ends up, let me know, and apps can be ready sooner." Like apartments can be ready sooner, I assume that's what it means. How about this? Regarding items in what seems to be the Palm Beach Island garage, sent from Kahn to Epstein, 2015. Janusz would like to review with you as he believes some items such as old computers, once wiped, can be discarded. Now, Kahn told the committee in his reportedly 7-hour deposition that despite being Epstein's accountant, working with this guy for years, serving as the co-executor of his estate, I mean, ABC News reported that Epstein was going to pay this guy $25 million, that Kahn said, quote, he was not aware of the nature or extent of Epstein's abuse of so many women until after Epstein's death. Apparently told the committee in his opening statement, had I learned of any of his horrific behavior, I would have quit work immediately. We tracked the expenditures as meticulously as possible, including gifts by Epstein to women and men. The gifts represent a very small fraction of Epstein's spending. I did not see them as red flags for abuse or trafficking. And he emphasized he, quote, did not see anything that suggested to me that Epstein was abusing or trafficking women or otherwise acting unlawfully. While Epstein was alive, I never observed any sexual abuse or trafficking of women and never received a complaint either by one of Epstein's victims or anyone else of such abuse or trafficking. But he did admit the following, and I think this is key. However, it pains me to think, and I deeply regret, that I may have unknowingly assisted Epstein in any way. Now, one of the key moments of his testimony, and we don't have the full transcript or the videos of his testimony, at least at the time of this recording, but it comes from what the Oversight Committee Chairman James Comer told the media, told reporters, quote, he confirmed, meaning Kahn confirmed, there were 5 clients that paid money to Epstein, and that was Les Wexner, Glenn Dubin, Steve Sinofsky, the Rothschilds, and Leon Black. We've already deposed Wexner, and we're going to be deposing Leon Black very soon. These were people that made significant transactions. So what Khan said is he was under the impression that Epstein made his money as a tax advisor and a financial planner. So these were the 5 people that transferred significant sums of money to Epstein. Now, again, to be clear, just because if they did financial work with him or had financial transactions with him doesn't mean that they participated in any criminality or had any knowledge of any criminality. Although I'll circle back to those names in just a minute. By the way, regarding President Donald Trump, who we've talked about a lot, we also know that his name appeared in the Epstein files, most notably in a collection of uncorroborated allegations of sexual abuse. Comer said that Khan, quote, had never seen any type of transaction to Trump or anyone in his family. However, I will tell you, Representative Suha Subramaniam said to reporters that Khan told the committee that the Epstein estate did reach a financial settlement with someone who had made accusations that were related to Donald Trump. Oh, and he also said that it came out former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak had financial dealings with Epstein. Now you go back to Richard Khan, okay? Back to potential legal liability. I have to go to what Representative Robert Garcia said after Khan's deposition. Quote, Epstein's massive sex trafficking ring would not have been possible without the consistent payments and services of his longtime accountant. He said that Khan made some important admissions. Quote, he helped facilitate a fake marriage between 2 women connected to Epstein, admitted to impersonating Epstein in communication with banks, and confirmed Epstein spoke about Donald Trump a lot. It's not credible that he had no knowledge of Epstein's activities, and his testimony today only raises more questions. So is he suggesting that Khan wasn't telling the truth, that Khan committed perjury, that he engaged in fraud-related crimes, banking crimes? By the way, I should tell you that CBS has reported that Khan and Epstein's lawyer Darren Indyke actually settled a lawsuit regarding fake marriages where you had foreign-born victims of Epstein would marry American-born victims, and this was all for purposes of skirting the immigration system. What about this statement from Representative James Walkinshaw? Today we've heard from Mr. Khan a lot of inability to recall emails, text messages he was involved in. If he was ignorant of Mr. Epstein's crimes, he was willfully ignorant. Willfully is a key legal term there. So obviously, his testimony is raising a lot of questions, right? You go back to some of the emails in the Epstein files that reference Khan. When you hear about what the analysis is of his testimony, I just want to read to you some emails. So for example, look at this one. This is an email from Khan to Epstein, November 2017. Bella sent me the latest batch of medical bills for girls. Just wanted to confirm that you do not want to see these and that Bella should pay all medical once girls confirm for accuracy. The response back from Jeffrey Epstein, bleaching is not acceptable. Sorry, pay it, but it's out of hand. Now, we did a whole episode on Epstein arranging or seemingly arranging for medical appointments and procedures and treatments for the females in his life and the secret network of doctors who were providing him services and access to him. But how about this? You have this communication where Khan is seemingly explaining the purpose of certain wire transfers, including payment sent to a friend for tuition for school. School, right? Anytime you talk about school with Jeffrey Epstein, you always have to think about how young were these females in his life, right? So CNN claims you have this email here that shows he's arranging a $3,500 tuition payment for a model. You look at this one about paying for an Airbnb. Epstein writes to Khan, how did we send the Airbnb money? Receipt? Khan seemingly responds, I signed up to send from my PayPal account, so your name was not involved. They authorized charge, but not yet confirmed from landlord as they have 24 hours. Interesting. Why is there a need to make sure Epstein's name is not there? There could be a number of reasons, but just got to call it out. Also, remember that mention of girls? There seems to be a lot of reference to girls in emails that are connected to Khan. So how about this one? There was an email that was sent to Khan in 2017. Hi, Rich. I believe Jeffrey bought US Open tickets for the girls, but I have not seen any request for payment. We don't know who these girls are. This back and forth regarding girls and their cable boxes being taken out. Khan is a part of that. You have this exchange regarding lottery tickets where Khan seemingly writes to Epstein in 2016, okay, now up to 1.5 maybe mega millions. We'll buy tickets today for girls. Woody too, meaning maybe Woody Allen. Any others? Please advise. Thanks. This email from Epstein's purported secret girlfriend or associate, Corinna Shuliak, who we've talked about on the show before. We dedicated a full episode to her. To Richard Kahn, 2016. This seems to be regarding maid services. Just to clarify, Bianca is doing only the girls' apartments, no laundry, no cleaning supply. The guest apartments are still on tests on Leo. I just spoke with Bella, so she knows already. Thank you. Also, look, it's kind of hard to connect a lot of this or put into context, but I'll just give this to you. So, for example, you have this 2011 email from Epstein to Kahn. Rich, please wire Nadia $10K. I don't know who Nadia is. I don't know the context or the purpose of that payment. But again, whenever you talk about Jeffrey Epstein and females and money, got to mention it. By the way, with that idea of keeping Epstein's name out of things, just look at this correspondence from March 2019. So this is just months before Epstein would be arrested on federal sex trafficking charges. His lawyer, Darren Indyke, writes, please see attached the filed certificate of formation and draft operating agreement for Truth Robot LLC. Thanks. Epstein writes back, can't have my name. Indyke writes back, will delete and have Rich, so I'm assuming that's Mr. Kahn, sign as treasurer of Southern Financial LLC. By the way, I have to mention this too. The BBC reported that Kahn at one point, when you're wondering what his role was, had asked Jeffrey Epstein's staff to pack up suitcases with the contents of Epstein's safe from his New York mansion and deliver it to his home. This is according to who appear to be federal agents. And apparently the FBI, there was evidence that they had spoken to Kahn's lawyer and that Kahn had agreed to turn over the suitcases, but apparently he didn't want agents coming to his home and that he wouldn't reveal who told him to remove this stuff from the safe. So just interesting to think about. And it should also be noted that after Epstein died, Kahn and Indyke, they were the ones who were managing the settlements that were paid out from the Epstein Victims Compensation Fund to the victims. So you're talking a payout of over $121 million to more than 135 survivors. Now, that doesn't mean they had knowledge of what Epstein or Ghislaine Maxwell were seemingly up to, because this is after the fact, but just want to note what their role was after Epstein's death and after the allegations asserted against him. By the way, Indyke's lawyer, Daniel Weiner, said in a statement to CBS after it was announced that Kahn and Indyke were subpoenaed for testimony. By the way, I think Indyke is going to appear for testimony next week. Quote, it is worth emphasizing that not a single woman has ever accused either Mr. Indyke or Mr. Kahn of committing sexual abuse or witnessing sexual abuse, nor claimed at any time that she reported to them any allegation of Mr. Epstein's abuse. Indyke and Kahn did not socialize with Mr. Epstein, and they have always rejected as categorically false any suggestion that they knowingly facilitated or assisted Mr. Epstein in his sexual abuse or trafficking of women, or that they were aware of Mr. Epstein's actions while they provided legal and accounting services to Mr. Epstein. But right now I want to go back to those big names that Richard Kahn seemingly called out to the committee. Victoria's Secret CEO Les Wexner, former Apollo Global Management CEO Leon Black, former Microsoft Windows Division President Steven Sinofsky, hedge fund investor Glenn Dubin, the Rothschilds, the big banking family. These are names that we have already heard about a lot so far. So for example, Epstein apparently controlled Wexner's finances, controlled his assets for years as his financial advisor. He was even granted power of attorney at one point, which allowed him to seemingly make all sorts of decisions involving Wexner, his family, his properties, his money. Wexner has claimed that Epstein expertly conned him out of millions of dollars, and that's allegedly how he acquired much of his wealth. Wexner released a 3-page statement ahead of his deposition to that committee saying he was pleased to testify and saying, I was never a participant nor co-conspirator in any of Epstein's illegal activities. To my enormous embarrassment and regret, I, like many others, was duped by a world-class con man. I cannot undo that part of my personal history, even as I regret ever having met him. And again, his actual testimony in front of the committee brought a lot of interesting moments, but maybe none more memorable than this.
Answer the question. Yeah. Okay. I'm sure we all appreciate the stories. We're just trying to answer the questions they actually wanted the answers to.
That's very helpful. Thank you. I hope it is. As an example, I didn't have the idea to inventory furniture or valuables. And it's like, how could you have all silverware in your house and I didn't count forks and spoons, and it's like, Jeff said people could be walking out with forks and spoons. Gee, that's a good idea. We ought to have an inventory. But then there was I hired a lady to be like the house manager who had run the U.S. Embassy in Rome, and she said, yeah, I know how to do this. And I said, well, why don't we keep inventories of stuff? And she said, well, yeah, I could do that. So she did that as kind of a puny example, but I wouldn't have had the idea. But then all the things were inventoried. That wasn't work for me or Jeffrey. It was just regularly done.
Yeah, kind of tough to hear, but that's when his counsel, his lawyer, seemingly said, I will effing kill you if you answer another question with more than 5 words, okay? Wexner laughed. I explained that at the time. You could say that looks quite nefarious, but any lawyer is not going to want their client to say more under oath than they have to. Leon Black. Now, we've talked about him before. The investor, former CEO of Apollo Global Management. Black reportedly left Apollo, by the way, in 2021 after a lot of questions came up about his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, saying it was for health reasons, though, but you do wonder if it's related to Epstein. Now, not only are there communications involving the two, like this one, Leon Black will come see J.E. tomorrow at 10 a.m. He may want breakfast. Please be prepared. But there are also allegations that Black is a rapist. You have this email. Got a call from victim woman who said that she heard about lawsuit against Black. Victim said Black raped her around 20 years ago, 2001 or 2002, in Epstein's townhouse. Victim described it, felt pain on massage table with head on floor and legs on his shoulders. Excruciating. Steven Sinofsky. You see these communications in the Epstein files between Epstein and this former Microsoft division president. According to Japan Times, Sinofsky had turned to Epstein on how to leave Microsoft at one point, and even shared or allegedly shared non-public information with Epstein, and also this separation agreement. There seemed to kind of be an element of trust there, because Epstein wrote him in this 2013 email chain, today's price is higher, mutual dates, you can't take money and then say I will disparage you in a year. August 18th is a vesting day. Sinofsky writing back in part, everyone is human. As long as it is one way, since there is no way I'm going to sue for this stuff, I want the SEC filing to make them look petty, not me. Glenn Dubin, hedge fund manager, billionaire. Now, Glenn Dubin is a name that we've talked about before, okay? He was mentioned in these documents. There are communications between him and Epstein. And you may recall that at one point in time, renowned Epstein accuser Virginia Giuffre had claimed that Ghislaine Maxwell, the convicted sex trafficker, had ordered her to give Glenn Dubin a massage, which according to her meant sex. Dubin denied the allegations, by the way. Oh, and I should also tell you that Dubin's reported wife, Eva Anderson Dubin, this doctor, this founder of Dubin Breast Center at Mount Sinai, I mean, we just talked about her a lot in a previous episode of Sidebar, because apparently not only was she a former flame of Epstein and allegedly provided him very special medical services, right? Access to doctors, medical appointments, and not only for him, but to others as well at the institution. But there was also an allegation that she was soliciting Epstein for money. So look, Khan seemingly confirms there is a money trail or transactions with these kinds of individuals, and that is significant. It doesn't necessarily mean that they were involved in criminality. It doesn't necessarily mean that they had knowledge of criminality, but there was a connection here. And I've always wondered, is Richard Kahn potentially going to be that connective tissue? And I will tell you also, next week's going to be interesting if Indike, this, Epstein's former lawyer, does in fact sit down for a deposition. What will he have to say? Although I do wonder if there are attorney-client privilege issues that can limit his testimony in a certain way. We shall see. But again, another aspect to the ongoing Jeffrey Epstein saga. That's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you should get your podcasts. You can also check us out on NBC's Peacock. We got Sidebar episodes up there too. If you want to follow me, X, Instagram, my News Nation show, Jesse Weber Live, Monday through Friday, 11 p.m. Eastern. I'll see you next time, everybody.
All right, guys, thank you very much for coming today. I have called you for a very special thing. We have an event day after tomorrow, and Khushi, you will make the necessary arrangements. Khushi.
Yeah, sure, sir.
You seem a bit off today.
Everything is good, sir. Don't worry, I will do.
All right, I am counting on you. All the very best.
ਕੱਲ ਰਾਤੀ ਰੋਈਆਂ ਮੈਂ ਤੇਰੇ ਕਰਕੇ ਸੁਣਿਆ ਏ ਤੂੰ ਵੀ ਰੋਇਆ ਮੇਰੇ ਕਰਕੇ ਕੁੜੀਆਂ ਚ ਲੜਾ ਮੈਂ ਵੀ ਤੇਰੇ ਕਰਕੇ ਮੁੰਡਿਆਂ ਚ ਅੜੇ ਤੂੰ ਵੀ ਮੇਰੇ ਕਰਕੇ ਮੈਂ ਇੰਨਾ ਪਿਆਰ ਕਰਾਂ ਮੈਂ ਇੰਨਾ ਪਿਆਰ ਕਰਾਂ ਕਿਉਂ ਨਖਰੇ ਜਿਹੇ ਦਿਖਾਵੇਂ ਕਿਉਂ ਨਖਰੇ ਜਿਹੇ ਦਿਖਾਵੇਂ ਇੰਨਾ ਨਾ ਸਤਾਇਆ ਕਰ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਮੇਰੀ ਜਾਨ ਨਿਕਲ ਨਾ ਜਾਵੇ ਮੈਂ ਜਦ ਵੀ ਕੁਝ ਬੋਲਾਂ ਤੇਰਾ ਨਾਮ ਬੁਲਾਂ ਤੇ ਆਵੇ ਪੁੱਛਦੀ ਮੈਂ ਤੈਨੂੰ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਸੱਚ ਸੱਚ ਦੱਸੀ ਵੇ ਇੱਕ ਵੀ ਨਾ ਗੱਲ ਵੇ ਤੂੰ ਦਿਲ ਵਿੱਚ ਰੱਖੀ ਵੇ ਦੁਨੀਆ ਨਹੀਂ ਚਾਹੁੰਦੀ ਵੇ ਤੇਰਾ ਮੇਰਾ ਪਿਆਰ ਵੇ ਸੁਣ ਮੇਰੀ ਸੁਣ ਲੈ ਯਾਰ ਵੇ ਨਹੀਂ ਸੋਹਣਾ ਲੱਗਦਾ ਏ ਹੈ ਜਦੋਂ ਵੀ ਲੜਦਾ ਏ ਜਦ ਵੀ ਕਿਸੇ ਨਾਲ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਾਂ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ ਵੇਖ ਕੇ ਸੜਦਾ ਏ ਰਾਜ ਤੂੰ ਹਰ ਵਾਰੀ ਹੋਏ ਰਾਜ ਤੂੰ ਹਰ ਵਾਰੀ ਲਾਵੇਂ ਇੰਨਾ ਨਾ ਸਤਾਇਆ ਕਰ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਮੇਰੀ ਜਾਨ ਨਿਕਲ ਨਾ ਜਾਵੇ ਮੈਂ ਜਦ ਵੀ ਕੁਝ ਬੋਲਾਂ ਤੇਰਾ ਨਾਮ ਬੁਲਾਂ ਤੇ ਆਵੇ ਤੂੰ ਯਾਰਾਂ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਬਹਿਨਾ ਏ ਤੇਰੀ ਦੂਰੀ ਤੇ ਮਜਬੂਰੀ ਦਿਲ ਮੇਰਾ ਏ ਸਹਿੰਦਾ ਏ ਕਿੱਥੇ ਜਾਵਾਂ ਨਾ ਜਾਵਾਂ ਹਰ ਇੱਕ ਗੱਲ ਮੈਂ ਪੁੱਛਦੀ ਆ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਕਦੇ ਮਨਾਉਂਦਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਤੂੰ ਮੈਂ ਕਿੰਨਾ ਰੁੱਸਦੀ ਆ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਚੰਗਾ ਲੱਗਦਾ ਏ ਭਾਵੇਂ ਸਿਰ ਮੇਰਾ ਤੂੰ ਖਾਵੇਂ ਇੰਨਾ ਨਾ ਸਤਾਇਆ ਕਰ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਮੇਰੀ ਜਾਨ ਨਿਕਲ ਨਾ ਜਾਵੇ ਮੈਂ ਜਦ ਵੀ ਕੁਝ ਬੋਲਾਂ ਤੇਰਾ ਨਾਮ ਬੁਲਾਂ ਤੇ ਆਵੇ
तो अभी आपने हमारा दुनिया सॉन्ग देखा सो प्लीज कमेंट करके बताना कि आपको सॉन्ग कैसा लगा
एंड हाँ वीडियो को लाइक करना जाने से पहले रिपल म्यूजिक स्टूडियोज के चैनल को सब्सक्राइब कर लेना थैंक यू बाय बाय एवरीवन